When the banging started at my front door just past 2 in the morning, it didn't simply wake me. It yanked me out of sleep like something had grabbed me by the collar. There was nothing glamorous about my night. I had been in bed in Savannah dreaming about a landscaping project for a client who insisted on English ivy despite living in a swamp. My 16-year-old daughter, Madeline, had said goodnight at 10 and gone to her room. It was a slow, sticky Thursday, the kind where the biggest threat is the air conditioning giving out. So when the pounding came, heavy and insistent, my first reaction wasn't fear. It was pure disorientation. Then I saw the lights, red and blue strobing across my ceiling, and my heart started hitting against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I wrapped myself in a robe and went to the door. Through the peephole, I could see 2 officers, their expressions tight, their posture rigid. I cracked it open with the chain still on. "Can I help you?" The older one asked if I was Danielle Vance, then continued without waiting. He said they needed to speak with me about a hit-and-run accident involving a 1967 Mustang convertible registered to my address. My mind went completely blank. My Mustang. The cherry red restoration I had spent 5 years and $65,000 bringing back to life. It was supposed to be sitting under a dust cover in my garage. I told him exactly that. He shook his head. "Ma'am, the vehicle is currently lodged in the stone fountain at Lafayette Square. The driver was seen fleeing on foot." I couldn't process it. Someone had taken my car? Who would even know where I kept the keys? The officer's eyes moved past me into the darkened hallway, and he said they had witness statements identifying the driver as my daughter, Madeline Vance. And those witnesses, he continued, were Keith and Susan Vance and Lauren Vance, my parents and my sister. The cold that moved through me had nothing to do with the night air. My parents and my sister had stood at the scene of an accident and pointed the finger at my child. Madeline, who gets overwhelmed ordering food on the phone. Madeline, who had failed her driving permit test twice on purpose because the thought of accidentally hurting someone terrified her. The idea of her stealing a vintage convertible and tearing through the historic district was laughable on every level except the one where my own family had just signed a witness statement saying she did it. The officers left at 2:45. I didn't go back to sleep. I walked quietly to Madeline's room and eased the door open. She was buried under her weighted blanket with a charcoal sketchbook resting on her chest, breathing the slow, deep breath of someone who had spent their evening drawing and nothing else. She hadn't gone anywhere. She hadn't done anything. And yet my family had just tried to hand her a criminal record. My mind turned to Lauren. I knew where she had been. The Midsummer Solstice Festival at the Tate Estate, the kind of event where the champagne costs more than my rent and any mess gets buried under NDAs. Lauren lives for those rooms. She needs the content, the exposure, the story. For 20 years, I had been the one cleaning up after the stories she left behind. When she got a DUI in college, I drove 2 hours in the middle of the night to bail her out so my father's name wouldn't appear on any police document. When she walked out of a boutique with a diamond bracelet she hadn't paid for, I went back quietly and settled the bill. I was never the star. I was the production crew, invisible and indispensable, maintaining a reputation that was never credited to me. I used to sit with that and wonder why I stayed, why I kept accepting the role. But toxic loyalty isn't something that falls on you all at once. It builds the way water erodes stone, slowly and without ceremony. My parents had trained me from childhood to believe that protecting the family image was an expression of love. They praised my silence. They called me the strong one. I accepted the label because it was the only form of recognition they offered. What I didn't understand until much later was that strong was simply their word for convenient. Tonight, they had crossed a line that no amount of conditioning could make me ignore. They hadn't asked me to absorb someone else's mistake. They had manufactured one and stamped my daughter's name on it. I sat in the kitchen in the dark, listening to the refrigerator hum. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just waited for morning, because I already knew exactly how the next phone call would go. At 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my mother. Not a text, a call. That meant she was in business mode. I answered on the second ring and said nothing. I just waited. "Danielle," she said, her voice precise and clipped, "we need to manage this before it becomes something bigger. Your father is on the line as well." He spoke next, his tone heavy with the particular kind of authority he uses when he expects compliance. They had already looked into the statutes. Madeline was 16. A minor's record gets sealed. Community service at most. It disappears when she turns 18. Clean slate. I asked about Lauren. My mother's response was immediate and sharp. Lauren had contracts, a swimwear partnership launching within the week, a DU I would trigger morality clauses and kill every deal she had. They were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in exposure. "So," I said slowly, "you want my daughter, who is afraid of driving, to confess to a felony she didn't commit, so Lauren can sell bathing suits." My father told me not to be dramatic. He said they were asking for a family adjustment, that Lauren's career was the vulnerable asset, that Madeline was young and resilient and would bounce back. Asset. That was the word he used. Lauren was the asset. Madeline was the problem to be managed. He told me the police would call back that day. All I had to do was corroborate their statement. Say I was asleep. Say I heard the car leave. Say I found the keys missing. "And if I don't?" I asked. My father said I would be choosing to destroy my sister's life and that I shouldn't expect any financial support for my landscaping projects next season if I couldn't function as part of the team. I ended the call without raising my voice. I simply pressed the button and put the phone down. A moment later, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Lauren had posted a story. Black background, white text, small and centered. It said she was heartbroken by the betrayal she had woken up to, that it was frightening when the people you trusted most turned out to be the ones who hurt you, that she was taking a break to heal. She had tagged it with family trauma and healing. She wasn't hiding. She was already rewriting the story, positioning herself as the one who had been wronged by some unnamed tragedy before anyone could tell the real version. She was building her alibi in real time. I stared at the screen and felt something in me go very still and very clear. For 4 decades, I had operated as their fixer, their cleaner, their convenient, reliable, strong one. And Madeline, my daughter, had never been a grandchild to them. She had been a piece they were willing to sacrifice when it became useful. They believed this was a negotiation. They thought the offer of next season's funding was enough to buy my cooperation. They had forgotten that I know how to build things, and what you know how to build, you also know how to dismantle. I went to my home office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. The room smelled of drafting paper and ink. This was the space where I managed million-dollar landscape contracts and negotiated with municipal committees. My family had always quietly dismissed what I did, reducing it to gardening. They had never paid close enough attention to notice that architect is part of the title. I opened my contacts and found the name Jeffrey Coles. Jeffrey is not a pleasant person to be across from. He works in high-stakes litigation and reputation management, and he is precisely as expensive and effective as he needs to be. He answered on the first ring. I told him I needed him on retainer. I explained the hit and run, the false police statements, the potential defamation. I told him the opposing parties were Keith, Susan, and Lauren Vance. There was a silence on his end, then the sound of a pen moving. He asked if we were looking to settle or destroy. I told him we were looking for total and unconditional surrender. I told him they had tried to frame Madeline. His tone shifted from professional to focused in a way that I found genuinely comforting. He told me to send everything I had. I told him I had something better than a statement. I had the black box. 3 years ago, during the final phase of the Mustang's restoration, I had a telematic security system installed under the dashboard. It wasn't a simple GPS. It was a full suite designed for high-value collector vehicles, covering impact detection, location history, and cabin audio that triggered automatically whenever the engine was running or a collision occurred. I logged into the security portal. The notification was already waiting. Severe impact detected at 2:17 a.m. I clicked through to the log. There was a high-definition audio file running 45 minutes long. It covered the drive from the estate party to the crash site and the 15 minutes that followed. I put on my headphones. The file opened with the engine sound I had worked years to restore, and it turned my stomach. Then bass-heavy music, and then Lauren's voice, slurred and theatrical. She was narrating for an audience. She was talking about the vintage interior, calling herself and whoever was with her main characters, clearly broadcasting to her followers in real time. Jeffrey noted it immediately when I played it for him. She had live-streamed the whole thing. Then came the tires screaming against cobblestones, the impact, the silence, and Lauren crying and asking where her phone was. A minute or two later, my parents arrived. My father's first question was whether the stream was off. My mother told Lauren to fix her face. She said Lauren was never there. When Lauren protested and talked about the car, my father laid out the plan, calm and methodical. The car had been stolen. Madeline was the same height. She was 16. Her record would be sealed. Lauren's partnerships would survive. It was all very logical, the way a board meeting is logical. Jeffrey set his glasses down on the table when it finished. He named the charges. Conspiracy to file a false police report, insurance fraud, obstruction, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. He said they weren't just bad parents. They were criminals. I told him I knew. I told him we were going to help them turn themselves in. At 11 that morning, we walked into the police station. My parents were seated in the lobby as though waiting to be called for a reservation somewhere nice. Lauren was performing quiet devastation. They were brought into a conference room and repeated their account, steady and rehearsed. When they finished, Jeffrey opened his laptop and told them that before those statements were filed, he would be entering new evidence into the record. He played the recording. Lauren's drunken narration, the crash, my father asking if the stream was off, my mother constructing the narrative, both of them choosing a name to carry the blame. The detective stood slowly. He said they were done. He told my parents they had the right to remain silent. My father looked at me and said I was destroying my own family over a car. I told him he hadn't been worried about the family. He had been worried about the brand, and I had just destroyed it. The fallout moved faster than I expected. Lauren was charged with driving under the influence, filing a false report, and leaving the scene of an accident. My parents faced obstruction and conspiracy charges. The audio became public record and journalists had the transcript within hours. Lauren lost her agency, her sponsorships, her audience, and a beach house deposit in what felt like the same afternoon. Jeffrey filed the civil suit separately. My parents settled. The amount was $150,000, which felt less like a victory and more like a severance package they had written for themselves. 6 months later, I was sitting in my garden. My parents had sold their home and left the city. Lauren had relocated to Atlanta, trying to rebuild something under a lower profile. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the morning at the police station. Madeline was a few feet away, painting, absorbed in something only she could see. The quiet around us was different from any quiet I had known before. It wasn't the silence of absence. It was the silence of space. Room that had been occupied for so long by other people's noise that I had forgotten it could belong to me. I had believed for a long time that cutting contact with family would hollow me out. What I found instead was that it cleared the air. I stopped trying to repair what had never been built for me. I stopped carrying what I had never agreed to carry. I sold the Mustang for scrap. I didn't need it restored. I didn't need it back. I didn't need to prove anything about what it had cost me or what it had meant. What I had built in its place was sturdier and couldn't be driven into a fountain. Breaking a cycle doesn't announce itself. It doesn't sound like a confrontation. It sounds like a paintbrush moving across canvas. It sounds like a slow breath let all the way out. It sounds like freedom arriving quietly, the way good things do.